Tonight is the very last day of Tavshin Pei Aleph. The last day of a year is always a milestone. Tomorrow night is Rosh Hashanah, first day of Aseres Yemei Tshuva. I think it's part of human nature when we close one period, 1 year, and we stand at the beginning of another. We always look back and reflect. And more than anything else, thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And whenever we thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Chazal teach us, Moida ala ora v'tzoyek ala osid. We always are Moida ala ora because we always have so much to thank for. But even more, tzoyek ala osid. And I think this year, when we say Tichel Shona v'Kiriloiseho, Tochel Shona v'Berchoiseho, it has some special meaning. This past year has been a difficult year in so many different ways, in so many different levels. First and foremost, the pandemic. It's been an awful year in which thousands upon thousands of Amchu Beis Yisrael lost their lives to this machla. A few months ago, when we spoke in Eretz Yisrael about Corona, and I'm just speaking very openly to you after a year and a half that we learn together every week, we've become like family. And the various different opinions and arguments in the film community, yes Corona, no Corona, those that denied the entire thing and those that were more vigilant. So from the beginning of this pandemic till today, the number of people that passed away in Israel and Eretz Yisrael is 7,500 people, almost 7,500 people. In an average year, how many people are killed in car accidents in Eretz Yisrael? 350, that's the average. 340, 360. So it is 20 times that number that passed away from Corona. 20 times that number. And we invest billions to prevent automobile accidents, car industry, and an infrastructure. So sometimes numbers just open up your minds and your hearts. So this has been a tragic year, Corona. But besides COVID-19, so many strange tragedies. Miron, Carlin, Florida, a house collapsing, and tens of Jews that lose their lives. Now the floods, which are Shaloike Derech Teva in New York City, in the biggest superpower in the world, in one of the greatest cities in the world, Eden should drown. So this is so strange. And many of these tefillas, mi berash, mi b'magefo, mi be'esh, mi b'mayim, have no meaning. So we used to just fly through these psukim, these tefillas. So this has been a strange year and a tragic year, in a year in which we feel that these are gzeiros. So when we daven Avinu Malkeinu, Kodesh Baruch should be goizo gzeiros toivos, and he should memamat gzeiros koshes va'achzoriyos. This also takes on new meaning. So really, Tichel Shona v'Kiriloiseho, Tochel Shona v'Berchoiseho. Let's all hope and daven and wish each other. It should be a Shnas Oiro and a Shnas Brocha. And really, I thank you for your tefillas. And please daven for me as well. I need your tefillas. We should be able to keep up our avodas HaKodesh. And none of us is getting younger. We're all getting older, and Kodesh Baruch Hu gives us all sustained health we should be able to continue. And as if Shlomo mentioned, I was never asked, do I agree to make this a kvius, but obviously I did agree, and it's a big schus for me. On my list of schusim and my list of arbotzes Torah, this Yarchikana has a very prominent place. So Baruch Hashem. I'm giving a shir. I don't see your faces, but I can only assume that you're back every week. So Baruch Hashem. Obviously, we're doing something good, and we are mishtasheh b'divrei Torah. So the topic we will be discussing today is the two of the greatest mitzvahs, and the dilemma that every moira heroa has is the balance. On one hand, Yom Kippur is chayav kores. Chiyuv kores are the harshest of Vedas. On the other hand, pikuach nefesh. So when I connected, I for a split second saw the Gemara and Yuma on the screen, and if I'm not mistaken, it was the Gemara. I think for a split second, I saw that Gemara on the screen. Different opinions that we find in the Gemara, yes. And the question was, and we have a lengthy discussion in the Gemara. And the maskona is, it's all about life. And I says to me, tshuva, the minig is, and it's not clear where the source of the minig is. The Tur, Tov Kuf Pei Beis brings, it's a minig haga'oinim from the times of the Ga'oinim. We add on 4 bakushas in every Shemoneh Esrei, every Tfilas Amida that we say. Zochreinu l'chaim, michu meichu avarachmem, zoche tzirav l'chaim barachmim, uchsoiv l'chaim toivim kol b'nei v'nesechom, v'sefer chaim brocha v'sholem. First 2 brochas and last 2 brochas. What are we asking for? Life, life, and life. Ma yisayin odem chai. The greatest gift that Kodesh Baruch Hu gives us is life. As long as you live, you could fix everything you broke. So there is this dilemma, seems to be a stira mesechet Tovis. But then Chazal say, so Chaye Torah mitzvahs is me'ein olam haba. So in the Yom Neroim, which basically Rosh Hashanah is about Malchus Shemayim, Yom Kippur is about Mechila Slicha v'Kapora. However, these 4 bakushas that we add on in every Shemoneh Esrei, not only Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sesim, and Tshuva, essentially we ask for life, Chayim. The Rambam has a list of introductions, Hakdamas, and Chelik Sheni Shel Moira Nevuchim. Usually, most of the times I quote the Moira Nevuchim, it's Chelik Gimel, because Chelik Gimel is about Tamei Mitzvahs. But now I'm quoting Chelik Beis. And the Rambam deals with the definition of life. What is life? How do we define life? So, biologists, physicists, this is a question which is more philosophical than scientific. How do we define life? And the Rambam writes, Kol hachayim misnoyaim, every creature that has motion. Not koyach acham ha'urav boy, like Aish in the beginning of Bava Kama. Every being, every living, every creature that could move itself from one point to another is defined as a living being. And I say that the ideal of life, Chaim Ruchniim, is the same. As long as we have the potential to grow, we're alive. As long as we have the potential to grow, to come closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to move. That is the essence of life. So the poskim all deal with a huge shaila. Gimel Rishonis and Gimel Achronis, we're not allowed to ask for tzrochim. It is only brachas and tzoyos which are designated for bakoshes tzrochim. Sholosh Rishonis are shvoches shel mokim, sholosh Achronis are hoidoya. So how come these 4 bakoshes Chazal b'chavonet tchila put in shtei brachas Rishonis, shtei brachas Achronis? We're not supposed to ask for bakoshes tzrochim in these brachas. I gave a sheet about this last Shabbos in my shul, and I quoted the Meiri in Kippur HaTshuva. Kippur HaTshuva of the Meiri. The Meiri writes, the life we are asking for is not just breathing and living and eating and drinking. It is Chaim Luchnim. Chaim sheyesh behem avos tzedek Yerushalayim, Chaim sheyesh behem ushel chlima. It is the life which he asked for from a Kodesh Baruch Hu in Berchas HaChodesh, every Shabbos Mevorach. So v'chai behem v'lo shiyomes behem. It is from this pasuk that we learn pikuach nefesh toicha kol ha'torah kula. But it is the real life of Amas Torah and Yerushalayim that we strive for, that we ask for, that we daven for. That is v'chai behem. חיי בעלי החוכמה ומבקשהו ללא יתעלמו כמיסה חשובים. That's the lesson of the Rambam Perek Yud, Hilchos Ritzeach, when the Rambam explains that this Talmud Shegolo Magla and Rabbi Yimoi. Why is that? חיי בעלי החוכמה ומבקשהו ללא יתעלמו כמיסה חשובים. צדיקים במיסוס קרויים חיים. So I apologize for the short introduction. After all, it's Erev Rosh Hashanah. It's Erev Rosh Hashanah. When I speak Erev Rosh Hashanah, I can't limit myself only to Aloch and to Lamdis, Seretzich von Herz. So I wish you all Shnas Chaim, Zochaynu L'Chaim, Melechuvas V'Chaim, Chosveinu V'Sefer L'Chaim, L'Manchu Elokim Chaim. It is for you, Rabbi Yisrael. It is for you that we ask for life. We ask for life in order to serve you, to come closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to grow. So please, so as I said before, we're dealing with the 2 greatest mitzvahs. On one hand, Koros, on the other hand, pikuach nefesh doicha kol haTorah kula. So in the past year and a half, more than any time in previous years, I've been dealing with sugyas of pikuach nefesh, sugyas that were thrust upon us in this pandemic. And I don't know whether you all are familiar with the Minchas Osher and Machlas HaKorona. The next sefer to come out, I hope it will come out before Rosh Hashanah, but obviously it won't. And I hope it's going to be out right after Yom Tov, is that Shlius, Hilchos Shemitah v'Yovel, because we're standing before a Shemitah year. So, maybe before we go into the actual shir, so many people have been turning to me the last day or two about a prusbol. So according to the Rosh, you need to write a prusbol at the beginning of the year, but ein halacha k'divrei Rosh. And the minhag is to write a prusbol only next year, Erev Rosh Hashanah Tovshin Pei Beis. But many people are machmir, based on the Urim V'Tumim. Some people write a prusbol tomorrow. It's a minhag toiv, but it's not an obligation. The ikach of a prusbol is next year and not this year. So coming back to pikuach nefesh, let me say this. There is a clash and a conflict between 2 great mitzvahs, but the mitzvah that overrides naturally is pikuach nefesh, and that is why we have an entire siman in Shulchan Aruch Tov Reish Yud Ches dealing with pikuach nefesh and Yom Kippur. And the halach is pashut v'barur, chodesh yesh mesakana, even a suffix sakana. If his life might remotely be in jeopardy, he needs to eat on Yom Kippur. There's a beautiful story and a letter between Reb Sheila Belzer, the second Belzer Rav, and it's Tzemach Tzaddik, the Vizhnitzer Rebbe. They were mechutani. And the Tzemach Tzaddik was gravely ill, and his doctor said that he would need to eat on Yom Kippur. And the family turned to the HaRav. We should give him divrei chizuk. So in our modern day and age, the HaRav would give a telephone call. I doubt he would send an email, definitely not WhatsApp. But he definitely would pick up a telephone call and talk to his mechutim. There were no telephones going back 160 years. So the HaRav wrote a letter to his mechutim, the Vision Rebbe. And he writes that he remembers his great father, Shalom Belzer, Sar Shalom of Belz, was in the same situation. And the doctor said he needs to eat on Yom Kippur. And when he ate on Yom Kippur, in that instant, he was Naharu Ponov, and his face was aglow with Simchas HaMitzvah. And we never saw that feeling and that radiance on his face, except when he ate a Kazayas Matzah. So this is an interesting story and a profound statement. On one hand, a person needs to eat Yom Kippur, he should be sad about it, that he's in a situation in which he can't fast. On the other hand, he's Makam the greatest mitzvah, and that is Machai B'hem. So when one needs to eat, there is no room for a chumrah. However, there's a concept of shiurim. Pochis mikashir. Many people, and even Moira Hoiroa, have a mistake. And I know there are many Moira Hoiroa. Almost every question that comes, could I eat, can't I eat, I'm not feeling well, a woman is pregnant, shiurim. What many people don't understand, and the very source of the sugya Chotze is Yom Kippur. Now the machlokes, Rabbi Yochanan and Shlokish, which is in Yuma Ayin Gimel Amud Beis, and once again Ayin Daled Amud Aleph. The machlokes regards every one of Mecholos Asuros, but the source of the sugya is in Yoma Ayin Gimel. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, Shahaloche Kemoisei Chotze Shiros HaMatayre, even Shiurim is Isa D'Oraisa. And we cannot be Meichel B'Shiurim only when there is a Chashash, Safek Pikuach Nefesh. If it's not at all a Chashash of Pikuach Nefesh, of Sekonas Nefeshus, there is no room for Shiurim. And this, I feel I must say this because this is something people don't know and they're not aware of. And so even Meirarah, it is so common. Almost every shayla, should I eat, could I eat, can't I eat, shiurim. Shiurim has no basis unless it's a safek pikuach nefesh. So why do we need shiurim? Because there's a concept of a kalakal tchila. If you can get away with shiurim, then you don't have a heter to eat a shir, keseves toichedechidus pras. However, and what I say now is a big chiddush. Rab Shloime Kluger, in a few different sources, Shulchan Aruch, Chachma Shloime, Tov Reish Yud Ches, Shalos Yeshuvas U'Elef Rab Shloime Kluger is make a shiurim, even when we're not dealing with the chodesh sheyesh b'sukah. And Reb Shloime Kluger has an amazing argument. He says, Chotze Shiros HaMatayre, but it's Yoiser Kal than an Issa D'Rabbanan. How could that be? An Issa D'Oraisa could never be Yoiser Kal than an Issa D'Rabbanan. It's true. Toises and Shuas Daf Chav Gimel writes, Chotze Shir, L'Reb Yochanan, Osa M'Atayre, Aval Ebo Lo Lav V'Lo Asay. Lo Lav V'Lo Asay. So this is a precedent. I can't speak ba'arichas about this, but there are isurim d'oraisa which are not included in the Taryag. We learn it from Kol Chelev. The Gemara also gives us svara chazil tzterufa. Toises and Daran both deal. If we have a svara, why do we need a pasuk? If we have a pasuk, why do Chazal use a svara? Two different terutzim. But nevertheless, it's a remez. It's not a asay or a lo taseh. So Reb Shlomo Kruger is making. And there is a certain source, Sefer HaChinuch, Shin Vav. That is the mitzvah of Tanis B'Yom Kippurim. Sefer HaChinuch writes, even if it's not a Sakona Gemura, we still are making Pochas Mikashir. So I explained in my Ksavim. I think it's not printed yet. I don't think it's printed in Minchas Osher Moedim. But I did bring additional sources that there is room to be makel by the Oraisa, not necessarily only by pikuach nefesh. For instance, the Shach is makel kufnun zayin yoredeya sekonas eivor in the Oraisa. He's not speaking about Chilul Shabbos or Yom Kippur, but he is speaking about an Isadi Oraisa for sekonas eivor. The Magen Mishnah maintains Shelo Kederech Achila Zosam and Torah. And the Magen Mishnah compares Shelo Kederech Achila to Chotz Shiyah. And it's a Gemara Meforeshes, Psochem Chov Dalad Amid Beis, that Shelo Kederech Achila is Mutar L'Chol Yishem B'Sakona. So according to the Magen Mishnah, it's an Isadi Oraisa Mutar L'Chol Yishem B'Sakona. So we do find two sources in Rishonim. Most notably the Magen Mishnah. L'chayra the chinuch as well, even though there's room to argue that the chinuch means that nanasan is calling the mura. It's a suffix, svek sveke. But pashtus aloshan and the brisker HaRav also understand. So there is no sakana chayra she'en by sakana. And therefore, when we are making a shiurim, we don't need to be thoroughly convinced that there might be a sakana. In any drastic case in which there might be a sakana, even a remote sakana, one could be mekel the shiurim. But not for a chodesh she'en sakana when there is no chashash sakana, no room for leniency, even shiurim. So as I mentioned, in this past year, I've been dealing more with the concept of sakana than any year before because we were so consumed with this pandemic. And I started mentioning before the Minchas Osher on Corona, which I wrote in the Haggadah to the Sefer. I hope by the time the Sefer comes out, it'll be totally irrelevant. And it's very uncommon for a mechaber to hope that the Sefer's writing will be irrelevant, but I really hope so. But to my dismay, 3 months ago in Eretz Yisrael, we rejoiced and we danced, the Magef is over. I even said in public that we should take these masks, put them away like the Tzintzenes Haman, and show our grandchildren, tell them the story of COVID-19. Well, obviously, it's not over. Kodesh Baruch Hu had different plans. And as I saw, we're in the midst of a huge surge. Thousands of people, especially in the film community. Just an hour ago, a young person came in and he told me his Zayda was a very choshev HaRav. I don't mention his name because this is private information. His Zayda was a very, very dear friend to me and one of the choshev HaRabbanim. That's Corona. He felt awful last week. Baruch Hashem, he's feeling better. So it's not over. So Pikuach Nefesh has been with us in the past year, and I wrote very significant shuvas. And one of the fundamental shaylas we had to deal with is, how do we define Pikuach Nefesh? Is it possible to quantify? The universal language that everybody should understand is the language of numbers, not words. So could we say in percentage points, how do we define sakana? How many people need to die? Percentage-wise, we should say it's a sakana. And what I try to explain is, numbers is the clearest language, but Halacha doesn't use this language. Because as long as we didn't develop statistical sciences, it was impossible to speak about percentage points. So halacha speaks in broad, general strokes and not in detailed numbers. But we do find some numbers. The Maggid Mishnah, quoted in the Magen Avraham Siman Shin Lamed Aleph, writes that every Yoledis is defined as a chodesh yesh b'sakon. But nevertheless, the Mishnah says when we're on Chalash Shabbos for Yoledis, we need to do a shinum. That's only midrabanan. But why do we need to do a shinum for Yoledis and not for every chodesh yesh b'sakon? So the Maggid Mishnah says Yoledis is natural phenomenon. It's not coincidence. It's not something out of the normal state of events. It's part of the healthy human experience. Baruch Hashem, we have a lot of yoldos and a lot of babies. So the Maggid Mishnah writes, we're dealing with natural phenomena. 1 out of 1,000 doesn't perish. And therefore, we need to make a shinui. First of all, that's a very surprising number. What we know about child mortality going back 800 years, even going back 100 and 200 years, I think the numbers were far more painful than what the Maggid Mishnah writes. Maybe. But it's still defined as pikuach nefesh. 1 out of 1,000, less than 1 out of 1,000, it is still pikuach nefesh. And I argued it's a state of Mishnah Berurah, Shin Lamed Zayin, Shin Tazayin, because in Shin Tazayin, the Mishnah Berurah deals, not the Mishnah Berurah, the Magen Avraham, Shin Tazayin, deals with the question, is one allowed to kill a spider on Shabbos? For some reason, Noshim Tzidkonius were always very scared of spiders. And in days of yore, they believed that spiders are dangerous and they could cause death. So the Magen Avraham writes, there is no heter to kill a spider on Shabbos. Why is that? Because the danger is only if you swallow that spider and he's going to go into your belly and eat away at your intestines, and you might develop blood poisoning. So the only danger that a spider could endanger your life is if he crawls on the wall onto the roof, falls into your plate, and you won't notice and you swallow him. And that is 1 out of 1,000. And 1 out of 1,000 is not defined as pikuach nefesh. So let the Magen Avraham decide 1 out of 1,000 is or is not pikuach nefesh. He uses the same number. The same number, Shin Tazayin, 1 out of 1,000 is not pikuach nefesh. Shin Lamed Aleph Bayoledes, less than 1 out of 1,000, and it is pikuach nefesh. Seems to be a stira. So what I prove is, it depends. Are we dealing with coincidence or with natural phenomena? You see a spider on the floor. What is your chashash? You might get onto the wall, get onto the ceiling, crawl on the ceiling, and exactly on top of your plate, he will lose his balance, lose his footing. Why would a spider lose his footing? But maybe just on top of your plate to fall into your plate, and you might not notice. Why wouldn't you notice? That is totally coincidental. Masha ein kain Yoledis. I proved this point with a mushal that I said. Let's try to imagine that in Shalit Tzedek, we have 1,000 babies born every day. There's no hospital in the world in which you have 1,000 babies born every day. But we have more Baruch Hashem ladies, births in Shalit Tzedek than any other hospital in Eretz Yisrael. And I assume that there are more births in Shalit Tzedek than any other hospital in the United States of America. Because Baruch Hashem, Yerushalayim, from community, we have more babies than anyone else in the world. Baruch Hashem. So let's try to imagine 1,000 births every day. And every day, one child or one Yoledis dies. Do we need to do everything within our power to prevent that? terrible tragedy that happens every day, are we allowed to be Machal Shabbos to try to prevent that tragedy, which happens every Shabbos? Or would we say, why are you so excited? Baruch Hashem, 999 women went happily home with their babies. So what if one of them died? That is outrageous. Yes, we will do everything to prevent that one family from this terrible tragedy. So the difference is between known phenomena and coincidence. And therefore I say, in the time of a pandemic, the numbers aren't that relevant. We need to do whatever we can to prevent death, even if it's 1 in 1,000, even if it's less than 1 in 1,000. So this is just a basic discussion going through again the concepts of pikuach nefesh. But I understand today we should focus on Yom Kippur. So I spoke about shiurim. Basically, pikuach nefesh, doichi Yom Kippurim. When we can, we would stick to shiurim. If there's any doubt, shiurim might not be sufficient, then oichel v'shoyse kedarko. Many times I was asked, people of very advanced age. My mother, Baruch Hashem, she's 93. She needs rachamei shemayim. Fradel bas Leah. Baruch Hashem, she's well, but she's very, very weak. And she's getting weaker by the day. And we're very worried. Like every person at this age, she has a pekala, many medical issues. She, Baruch Hashem, went through Corona, totally recovered. She had 2 strokes. So throw in a capital Tillim for Fradel bas Leah. But people that are frail and very advanced age, do they fast or don't they fast? Is age a factor? They all have medical conditions. Most people of very advanced age take a lot of medicine. I know personally of 2 gedolim. I was not authorized to quote their names, and therefore I won't. But I know personally of 2 of the greatest poskim of our generation when they achieved very advanced old age. I don't remember whether it was 85 or 90. They stopped fasting. Does that have any halachic basis? So let me tell you how I see this. The biggest sakana for elderly people fasting is not that their life will be endangered by their fasting, but dehydration could cause dizziness, a lack of balance, and they might fall. And when a person of advanced age falls, that is a terrible danger. Their bones are very brittle. Many times, when an elderly person falls, he breaks his pelvis. And bones don't heal in this age. And many times it's the beginning of the end. And the biggest sakana when a person who is frail and old, when he fasts, even though there's no reason to believe that fasting would endanger his life. But fasting definitely would cause a certain degree of dehydration. Not the level which would endanger his life, but he is very likely to fall, and that is pikuach nefesh. So this is a paradox. If he's in a wheelchair, he would have no heter to eat or drink, because he won't fall. If he is bedridden, we won't give him a heter to drink. But if he's up and around, then skonas anafila is very, very relevant. So he has a caregiver and somebody is with him, but it's impossible to guarantee. Person gets up, even if somebody is holding him, he might fall, and that would be a terrible danger. So if a person is fine and he's vibrant, age in itself is not a factor. I know a person who's 95 and he goes to the gym every day and he goes to swim every day. Bili ayin hara ad 120 halavai shenizkeh. But that is very rare. Most people of very advanced age are frail, and the greatest danger is they might fall. And therefore, I say they should drink. If they're totally lucid and in control of things, they could drink l'shiurim. If you drink l'shiurim and you keep it up, you will have enough fluids. And the danger is a lack of fluids, dehydration. But not always are elderly people in total control, and the children come to visit. They're not there all day. In that case, they shouldn't rely on shiurim because they must have enough fluids to prevent dehydration. So I don't know what else to discuss because there are 1,000 halachas. So Reb Shlomo, I don't know how you plan this session. Do you want to present some questions to me and you want me to address some questions? Because, I could go on from one sugya to the other, but there are so many sugyas in pikuach nefesh. Did people or doctors send any questions, or how did we plan this session?
A lot of the questions were negated to what the Rav mentioned. The statistical question of what is considered to be pikuach nefesh in light of all the machlekes we have out there because of corona. Doctors and many rabbanim just don't know what we take seriously. What is considered a statistical chayla is the fact that if you don't have sufficient nutrition, it could lead to something. They're just totally confused in today's. Maybe the Rav can give us a couple of corona-related cases we take the safer and what's arisen in the last few months to give us a few real live.
Yes. Okay, so let me say this. We would expect after a year and a half of COVID to have more clarity than we ever had, but we have more confusion than we ever had before, which is in itself confusing and troubling. So in the Minchas Osher and Corona, and it's a fascinating work, person saw my sefer, the sefer Minchas Osher and Corona, and he said, I always admired the Rav greatly, but I didn't know you're a Navi. And I said, neither did I. So could you please share with me how you reached this conclusion? Maybe you'll convince me. I doubt it, but share with me. So how did you reach the conclusion that I'm a Navi? So he says, I look at the sefer, and I'm sure you started writing the sefer 3 years ago. How did you know Corona is coming if you're not a Navi? So I said, if that's your proof, then I'm sorry to disappoint you. Loi Navi onoichi v'loi ben Navi. But I felt the responsibility, the awesome responsibility of Klal Yisrael. And I had more time than ever before because I barely leave the house. Most of the shiurim were on Zoom, so I had more time to write. So Baruch Hashem. But as I said, there is more confusion now than there was a year ago. And in my sefer, there's a big notice at the beginning of the sefer. And I asked anybody learning in the sefer to note the date in which the tshuva was written. Because even a year ago, it was very dynamic. Opinions changed. Do you remember at the beginning of this pandemic, the medical establishment recommended wearing gloves, and everybody wore surgical gloves? And then after a month or two, they said, no, it's nonsense. Throw away your gloves. Use sanitizers instead of gloves. So even the scientific world and the medical establishment changed. So I saw it of major importance to say, every tshuva you learn in this sefer, realize the date, because some things changed. And tshuvas I wrote in real time might not be relevant at a later time. So this is the second year of COVID, and there is more confusion than ever before. Misrad HaBriyut in Eretz Yisrael is totally confused. They change the rules every day. People call them Misrad HaBriyut, and they get confusing answers. So it is only us that are Rabbanim that need to maintain a certain degree of consistency and sanity. But we need to rely on professionals. One of the first simonim in the Sefer is the validity of scientific knowledge. And I made a very important point. There's a huge machlokes in Achronim, Sam Sofer, Divrei Chaim, tons of others. Nemonos aroifim. Does doctors have nemonos? If they're not from? Huge discussion. And I differentiated between two different shaylas. And many confused between them. The question of nemonos aroifim is two different shaylas. One shayla is, do we believe and trust the local doctor in the shtetl? He's a guy, he's a non-frum Jew. Do we believe him? When he says, your life is in danger, do we believe him? When he says, this dam is not dam nidus, she has a makkah, do we believe him? That is the question most Achronim deal with. The direct question of nemonis haroif. It is a totally different question. Do we rely on scientific knowledge, medical knowledge, from the medical world, medical establishment? That is a totally different question. Regarding that question, it is clear as daylight. Shemesh v'tzorayim, be'esed b'kutcher. I don't have any more expressions from Chazal. That of course we rely on scientific data, information. Otherwise, we can't pass shaylas in any field. Not only pikuach nefesh, Hilchos neder, Daled Mises based in. Hilchos gitten, Mishnah gitten the fine base. It took 2 weeks and the guy died. How do we know whether he died from this disease or from something else? We ask doctors. So we rely on medical scientific information in every area in halacha. Dina nefoshes, sikos chavere be'even or be'egraf. Im meis machmas amaka, chayiv misid. How do we know? The Rambam writes, we ask doctors. So, relying on scientific data, of course we do, on mainstream scientific data. The question of an nemonos haroifim is more, do you believe your local doctor? He's not Jewish. He's not from. Does he have nemonos? That is a different question. Let us be practical now. You cannot eat or drink to prevent getting infected. No. Regarding the cholera outbreaks, and most of the tshuvas of Achronim we have, and we have tons, Rebbe Kiva Eged, the Yeshuas Yankov, the Shoyel Meshev. In my Sefer on Corona, I brought all the sources. Almost all of them deal with cholera. And most of the Gedolim Paskin, even healthy people should eat and drink. And that's the famous story of Rebbe Sol Salanter in Vilna. He got up on the Yom Kodesh and he ate Yom Kippur. And Rebbe Tzalal HaKoyen in Vilna disagreed with him. So I don't want to go over the sources again. It's kedai, to learn a few simonim in Minchas Osher and Corona. But that was cholera. And cholera is not corona. Rabbanim need to be familiar and intelligent to understand. Cholera affects your stomach. People died from diarrhea, from shilshul, and they died in a very short time from dehydration. They didn't have enough nourishment and fluids to sustain them. And that is why the psak was, you must eat and drink. Corona doesn't affect your digestive system. It's more about your lungs, respiratory system, and other bodily functions. There is no heter to eat and drink to prevent getting corona. And this is different than all the tshuvas we find at the outbreak of cholera. People that have an active case of corona and they're sick should not fast. They should eat and drink as usual. If you have corona, but you're asymptomatic and you feel well, you could fast. I know that many doctors say differently. And they say, if you have corona, you have this infection, even though you're feeling fine, you're not symptomatic, you should eat, you should drink.
Doesn't matter if you're vaccinated. We have a question here. There have been vaccinations, but as the Rav knows very well, the vaccines are being broken through now. Does this play into the Koch Nefesh question at all?
Yes. If you are vaccinated, recently vaccinated, and you did contract corona, and there are more and more cases of that nature. Now, I think the vaccines have proved themselves in an amazing way. To me, it's clear the vaccines have saved thousands of Jewish lives, probably hundreds of thousands or millions of lives worldwide. However, the vaccine is not foolproof. And the big disappointment is that after months, the effectiveness declines dramatically. And that is why I recommend getting the third shot, the booster. But some people got corona even after the third vaccine. The situation in Israel is almost all the people that have died recently or are critically ill are not vaccinated. And therefore, it is so beyond me why people aren't taking the vaccine. The vaccine is a lifesaver. However, people are getting corona even after the third vaccine, but usually it's very mild. Very mild. Some people aren't feeling well, but their life is not in danger. So whether you are vaccinated or not, if you're sick, if you have a fever, you should not fast. If you're asymptomatic and you feel well, you could fast. The Hagdora of a choile in halacha is a choile that is nofel mishkav. The fact that you have the virus does not define you as a choile. Agav, we all have 1,000 viruses. But if they don't damage your health, then you live with them. So if you feel just fine, but you did have a COVID test and you seem to have COVID, but you feel well, you don't have a fever, you don't have any symptoms, in my opinion, you could fast. If your doctor feels differently, follow your doctor. In Hilchos Yom Kippurim, you ask your family doctor. If he's an honest doctor and you trust him with your medical issues, follow his instructions. My psak, if it doesn't go against doctor's instructions, is if you're sick, you don't fast. If you're feeling fine, you could fast.
Someone who's immunocompromised, one of the shails we have here, is that automatically chilish yesh by sakana? And some people who have now they're starting to give or to gear up for the third shots here in Chutz La'aretz. What happens if your vaccine comes out on Yom Tov?
Yes. Could you get the vaccine on Yom Tov? Well, if you need to travel to get the vaccine, definitely not. But Amir and Anochri, one could be Mekel. So there are a few tshuvas in Mincha Sosha, but at the initial stage, in some countries like England, you will give it a date and time. And if you missed it, you won't get the vaccine till 6 months from now. To the best of my knowledge, in America and Israel, you could choose when to get the vaccine. So why would you go on Yom Tov? Why would you go on Shabbos? It's not pikuach nefesh to get it a day or two earlier. To the best of my knowledge, in America or in Israel, at this stage, I think everywhere you could choose when to get the vaccine. So a year ago, there are a few tshuvas in Mincha Sosha. When a person was given a specific time and date, you could get the vaccine here and now. If you skip it, If you don't get it, you're going to need to wait another 3 months. I paskin, one could be Mekel Amir Lenachim. Get a non-Jewish driver and drive there. Getting the injection is not Chilul Shabbos. It's not into a vein, and it's not a secretion that blood will come out. So I think you could get the vaccine on Shabbos. The problem is just driving there. So if it needs...
And if the person administering it is Jewish, makes a difference?
If the person administering is Jewish, I don't think so. If he's a non-from Jew, he's not doing it for you. He's doing his job. I don't think that is defined as Amir Lenach. So if you get the vaccine and it's not associated, it doesn't involve Chilul Shabbos, you do not need to inquire who is the nurse giving you the shot. But once again, if you could go on a weekday, there's no reason, no justification to go on Shabbos or Yom Tov. But if you can't have it any other day, as the situation was a year ago, I was Matir Amir Lenach. But I don't think that is the situation today.
Several questions here about diabetics. A, what is the Rav's psak in general about the category diabetics fall into? Are they yesh by sakana or not? And does that change in any way benigea to corona?
Diabetics that are balanced could fast, but diabetes is a disease which is so individual. And what I usually pass for diabetics is you consult your doctor, preferably a from doctor, but even if it's not a from doctor, if he's honest, if he's caring, and he knows what Yom Kippur means to you, you could rely on him. Because regarding the question I just briefly mentioned before of an Amonis Leifim, the general psak is, even a non-Jewish doctor, if he's trustworthy, if he's honest, he knows what Yom Kippur means to a from Jew, you could rely on him. So diabetes, when it's under control, you could fast. If you're a new diabetic, then try it out. Shabbos B'Tamis, Tisha B'Av. It's a bit late now, but you could just try it out and see how it works. But generally, consult your doctor. Consult your doctor regarding diabetes.
Okay, two last questions. One is negated to corona. One of the symptoms of corona is fatigue and very low energy that can last many weeks. Is that going together of something that could be a sakana?
I don't think so. When it's general fatigue and not something very extreme, I would not say that a person needs to fast, needs to break the fast. If it is something extreme, and I know some patients just couldn't get out of bed, in that case, I would be makel, but I would prefer and recommend shiyurim. But because we're dealing with a relatively new disease, I once again stress, if your personal doctor feels differently, follow your doctor's instructions.
Okay, one more shaila here, which is a klolistic shaila. A doctor is asking, as you know, here in Chosaretz, we have to be on duty, and he has a possibility of, he cannot be off both Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and he has to do a swap. Should he do Rosh Hashanah, which is first, or should he wait and work in Rosh Hashanah and save it for Yom Kippur? This is obviously a well-known shaila what the Rav has addressed before.
Yes. If he works on Yom Kippur, will he be able to fast? Because if he's a surgeon and he has surgery on Kippur afternoon, I don't think, in many cases, a surgeon needs to be sharp, focused, at his best, especially when performing complicated surgery. But if in his profession, he is confident that he could work while fasting, I would say it's better to work on Yom Kippur than Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah, you have to kiyas shofar. The Ikar mitzvah Yom Kippur is fasting. So if you can be in Shul Rosh Hashanah, and I don't know which hospital you're at, will you be able to have Tkiyah Shofar? Tkiyah Shofar, I'll say the Brochus Malchi Zechon Shofars. Obviously, you're not going to have a minyan. So I think it's preferable to be Rosh Hashanah in Shul than Yom Kippur. But if you'll need to break the fast on Yom Kippur, then preferable to be in the hospital of Rosh Hashanah than Yom Kippur. That's my psak, and I was asked many times.
Okay, just let's conclude here with the Rav's HaRav. This is relatively straightforward, but we're getting questions here of elderly parents, etc. Can the Rav just give his HaRav on what's considered to be a pachas mikashir, in order they should not get dehydrated, and how are you, my Rav, specifically to this situation?
Yeah, so I usually, when I speak about these shaylas, I don't go into details and clearly define the shura, because every sefer and every contest in Yom Kippur will have it. When we're dealing with fluids, it's 35 cc. That is the shir of Malay Lugmav. And most of the time, we're dealing with fluids more than food. The problem of a kazayis is because the kazayis is a shiur nefach and not a shiur of weight. The average matchbox, I don't think they use matchboxes in America. I don't know, but we have matchboxes in Israel. A matchbox is usually, I would say, the shiur of a kazayis, which would be the average of 2 olives. So usually by mitzvahs, we're makbid shir chazonish. But when we're dealing with pikuach nefesh, I would say a kazayis size of a matchbox. If you could, every 9 minutes. If necessary, we go down to 4 minutes. Achila v'shtia einan mitzdarfen. So you could eat pochas mikoseves. A kazayis is a half a kaseves. Kaseves is far bigger than a kazayis. So you can eat pochas mikoseves and drink pochas memaloy migamav together. But in most cases, we're dealing with fluids. Most cases of pikuach nefesh, we're not dealing with food, we're dealing with fluids. So the shir kaseves, I don't want to get into the exact measurement.
I understand. Okay, so we're going to leave that to the individual rabbanim. But just one Kol Yistika Shaila to end. Rav mentioned about elderly people and falling. In fact, Lederach provided a grim statistic here that a broken pelvis, after that, the mortality rate in the year after the breaking pelvis is extremely 50% mortality rate after a broken pelvis. Is there an inyan to tell an elderly person that he must stay in bed? Is there such a chiyuv?
I don't think so. So this brings us to a very fundamental question regarding Dinei Tzayim and Pikuach Nefesh. Is a person mechuyev to get on an IV line to prevent eating or drinking? No. Is a person mechuyev to stay in bed all day and all night to prevent the need to drink? No. Olam kiminhogei nayeg. And if it's a Pikuach Nefesh situation, it's a Pikuach Nefesh situation. It's also not realistic to tell a person that doesn't have to be in bed that he needs to be in bed. He needs to go to the bathroom. He needs to get up and around. So there is no chiyuv to tell an elderly person you stay in bed. And if there is a sakonas nefila, he should drink. I wasn't aware of that statistic, but I'm not surprised. So the statistic is shocking. The mortality rate 1 year after a broken pelvis is 50%. But probably, if you add on a few months, it'll be more than 50% because, And that is a broken pelvis. Sometimes there are other broken bones as well. And so I didn't hear this from other poskim, but the way I see it, the ikar sakana for elderly people fasting is falling and breaking your pelvis or other bones, which many times that is the beginning of the end, as Dr. Lederach just substantiated what I said before. Okay, my dear friends.
A bracha from the Rav, please.
Let's decide let's be Messiah Ma'ena Psicha. It has been a painful year, and I hope we should all daven. I thank you for your tefillas, and I need your tefillas. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should help us all. We should be able to learn together for many, many weeks and months and years to come. Have nachas, have shefa, have good health, and Zechreinu l'chaim, melech chofetz b'chaim, v'chosveini b'sefer ha'chaim, l'mancho elokim chaim. We should be zoicha to be as goyel tzedek b'meiru v'yameinu. A good gebencht yor.